Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to hear from these talented artists today that are currently being featured in Faces of Wisconsin through May 9th here at CAM. So thanks for being a part of the panel. I just want to kindly remind you, any public viewers, please stay muted through the program. We will be taking questions at the end for the artist. If you do have a question, please send it directly to me, Annie Johnson, using the chat feature. Again, we'll be taking those questions at the end. Again, thanks for joining us. Thanks to the artists for being here. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Chamati, who is our curator of Faces of Wisconsin. Mary, take it away.
Thank you, Annie. Well, Annie's our technical wizard who's making this all happen, and we're thankful for her to put, because she put together the slideshow that we'll be viewing today and all sorts of other technical wizardry. We also have a sponsor for the show, which is Landmark Feed, Seed, and Supply, and we're grateful for their support. Actually, this exhibition was originally the idea of the then board member Pam Rushman, and she formed a committee along with Patrick Doughman, and I was on it as well. And she had the vision that she wanted to feature a portraiture show, but we wanted to seek out a lot of people with a variety of media, and so we came down to 7 artists, and we're so happy that many of them are here today. We will have a recorded message from Patrick Doughman, who could not join us. What's interesting about this show, we have such a variety of media. We have oil painting, as you're seeing on the screen now. We have photography, fiber art, and fiber and oil painting mixed together, and polymer clay, and acrylic painting. And the other thing that's pretty interesting is some of the artists that we have featured here are creating their own unique technique that is very individual to that artist. So we'll be exploring that as well today. So as far as the portraits, we have historic and everyday people who are living today and faces of unsung citizens. So it's kind of a combo of historic and everyday people. Let's see, Annie, I'm looking for the participant screen.
Sure.
There we go. We're going to have just brief introductions now, starting in with Lori Beringer. Would you please tell us where you're from and what medium you've been specializing in, especially for this show? Lori.
Hi, I'm from Plymouth, Wisconsin, and I've been painting in oil. So most of them are oil and linen, or I think there's one with canvas.
I'll sub in for Patrick. Patrick is from Cedarburg. He's lived here more than 60 years, and he has a variety of media in the show. He has an egg tempera painting, he has acrylic engravings, and he has a 4-color linocut, linoleum block print, which is a self-portrait. Sasha.
Hello, I'm also an oil painter. My studio is in Thiensville, in the old Thiensville Mill, and I paint either on pine board, pressed pine board, or cotton canvas.
Rosy?
Hey y'all, my name's Rosy Petri, and I am primarily a fabric artist, but I also use block printing and digital illustration to kind of make portraits out of fabric in a collage assemblage style.
And Vicki.
Hi, I live in Cedarburg and I'm a photographer. I enjoy using alternative methods for my photography. Some of this photography and this show, just straight photography, plus also presented in caustic.
Janet?
Hi, I live in Brookfield, and for most of my artistic life, which goes a long, long way back, I've been painting in oil. Maybe the past 10 years, I'd say I've been experimenting with using oil over different backgrounds, mainly vintage, like vintage fabric and vintage wallpaper to kind of tell stories.
Doug?
Hi, I live in West Bend, and my medium of choice is polymer clay, which usually after I bake it, I paint it with acrylic paint.
Great. Annie, can we have the next slides, please? So Doug, your turn to delve into some of your artworks in the show.
Okay, so one of the reasons I love Wisconsin is the way that we embrace the strange and the weird. And the sculpture that you're looking at right now is a perfect example of that, where a guy by the name of Eugene Shepard, he was the guy that invented the hodag. So he lived 1800s, he lived in Rhinelander, worked in the logging, and he was known for his tall tales and pranks. So one day he came in and said that he caught this creature that he called the hodag, which was, it was part like prehistoric creature. And he had people convinced that he actually caught it. So he ended up with the help of a wood carver, ended up carving this creature out of wood. And then he started taking it to local fairs, and he set up a tent so people could go in kind of like a sideshow and see the hodag. And then only till it got so much attention that finally he had to admit that it was a hoax after some scientists are coming in from the Smithsonian to do an investigation. But what I love about it is because everybody knows Rhinelander as the hodag city, and the fact that, you know, they embraced it, they kept it going. I think this could have easily have just disappeared in history. So yeah, I think that's a perfect example of just the way we embrace the strange and the weird.
Next slide, Annie. There we go.
All right, this one is of Samson. Samson was a male gorilla that lived at the Milwaukee County Zoo. He was probably one of the largest gorillas in captivity. He became a main attraction. And he's also well known for, if you see in the picture, the glass looks like it's cracked. He used to bang on the glass, and they don't know if it was because of boredom or if he just enjoyed the reaction from the people. But yeah, I sculpted him. I think more people will recognize Samson than most of the other people I did in the show. He's such kind of this iconic character. Yeah, and then right now the zoo still keeps his memory alive with a 5K race. And then you can also see a replica of him at the Milwaukee Public Museum too. And this is a sculpture of Bill Benson. He's an owner of a UFO themed tavern in Dundee, Wisconsin. It's called Benson's Hideaway, and for years it's been known for its UFO sightings. And because he has an annual UFO Days festival every year, So it's gotten, the area's gotten so recognized that it's actually become the UFO capital of Wisconsin.
Have you been there yet, Doug?
At the tavern?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to, every once in a while, I'll set up a booth at the UFO Days Festival, and I'll make little magnets or necklaces. And it's a good way of, I'm not one to walk up to people and ask questions or ask them stories. So I set up a booth, and then they come up, and then I can ask them if they've seen anything and have a conversation about UFO sightings. And I make some money too.
Great. Janet, you're up next.
I recognize that lady. Yep. This happened over a period of time. As I mentioned, I love using vintage fabric, and I have quite a collection. I hope I live long enough to use it all, but this particular fabric just struck me immediately because I went to high school during the 60s, and this could be 50s, 60s, and I was just drawn to it. And I knew one day I would find the right subject. And indeed, a few years later, I was in an antique shop in Wisconsin and found a photo of this delightful and charming young majorette who looked like she was just enjoying what she did thoroughly. And I wanted to just give that, portray that feeling of youth and innocence and joy and kind of the time that she lived in when things did seem a bit simpler. I would say, I love doing figures anyway, but I would say that there's always something that kind of gives you pause. And the big feather in her hat, I had to really work on that to be sure it looked feathery.
Very nice. Very nice. Next slide, Annie.
And I'm glad this one is next because, again, it's using the vintage fabric. And by the way, there's a name for that. A lot of people don't know this, but it's called bark cloth. And the reason is it's not because it's made of anything from bark, but it's snubby and it's kind of a coarse fabric. And the texture reminded people of bark, tree bark. So that's why it came to have that name. It was pretty common. You'd see it in draperies and things in the 40s, 50s, and even up into the 60s. But again, I believe I had this fabric first because I just collect them wherever I see them. But there is a flea market up north called St. Germain Flea Market. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's huge and it's just amazing what you see. Well, I saw this man and it's funny, I'm not the most outgoing person, but give me a camera and I'm really like Wonder Woman. I lose all my inhibitions and I thought I have to photograph this man. So he was nice enough to pose for me, and some people are really self-conscious when you ask. He just kind of like, oh yeah, I do this every day. And he just stood there, took the pose, and it's one of my favorites. I really like this. I feel like he's kind of gazing out, thinking about where he's going to go hunting or fishing next.
Great.
And I do like to work large. They're all somewhat large, as you'll see from the size on them. It just makes me, I like that. This is a person from Wisconsin who's lived here in Milwaukee her whole life. And I'm so impressed with this young woman, Fatima Laster. She owns the 5 Points Art Galleries and Studios. And she grew up in this neighborhood, and it's Port Washington. I'm terrible with directions, but anyway, it's on Port Washington. And later, she'd been away, she came back, and a church was empty, deserted, and she got it for, you know, very little money. And she spent years, several years renovating it. And it's a wonderful gallery. And that's how I met her. I went to an opening and I was just so impressed with Fatima and all she had done. And so I really wanted to paint her portrait. And this is not vintage fabric because she's modern, and I just felt that I wanted to accentuate just her beauty, her clothing that she had on. And there she stands. And it's funny because I was going to have her come to my studio to be photographed, as I usually do, because I can control lighting and all of that stuff. But I went there just to talk to her about it. And fortunately, I had my camera. And the light was streaming in from a side window. And I said, Fatima, let's just try a few. Well, the pose, I knew that was it. I didn't have to have her over, and she loves it, I'm happy to say. So that's the story of Fatima. And I encourage everyone to go and visit this gallery. It's really wonderful.
Janet.
Hello, this is my contribution to the exhibit are 13 portraits from my pandemic portrait series that I photographed March, April, May of last year during the pandemic when we were all sheltering in. We were all under the safer in order by the governor. And when I came to decide how to present the images, I thought, since all of them were captured through windows or doorways, because we had to remain safe, that I would perhaps look for a vintage window and mount all the photographs in the window. So that's what this is. This is a 10-pane vintage window, and it's titled A Shy Spring. It is there's a poem in there titled A Shy Spring, which is written by my husband, who is directly above the poem. And I originally for this project, I had decided that I would photograph people out in the environment and do environmental portraits. And for this, I had to change the idea because of the pandemic, and I basically did indoor environments with the outside reflected. And it was cold weather, no one was going out, I didn't see any cars on the street, people were really careful and sheltered in. And so I wanted to get some of the reflection of the outdoors in each one of the images to reflect everybody's hope for spring and getting outside. And so that's basically what these are. And I tried to get people doing what they were doing during that time. Some were planting seedlings to plant outside. Mothers with children were doing art projects. One of my friends, Mary, in the lower row was doing sketches of all of her grandchildren. So it was really interesting to connect with people, even if it was through glass and doorways.
Vicki, what was your tool for this?
These are all iPhone, all processed in my iPhone.
Amazing.
This happens to be my beautiful daughter. And this is her office that she works in at home. She was working at home already before the pandemic hit. And she was joined by her husband, who also is a computer programmer. So she was sharing her office with her husband, and has been for, I guess, probably about a year now. And this was taken through, if you can see the little stained glass, part of a stained glass window that's reflected in the artwork on the back wall. I was shooting through that window. It's stained glass around the edges and clear in the middle. And I shot through that, and the reflections of the outside were amazing. They have a wall next door that is covered with vines, and that reflected in, and it kind of blended with the hanging plants that she has inside. And this in the exhibit is an encaustic piece. This is Jean Repke. She is a resident at Lasada Care Facility. She's in her 90s, and of course they were in quarantine and could not have any family members visit. She was one of the lucky people that was on the bottom floor, so that her daughter Linda could come and visit her through her sliding glass door that went out on the patio. And Linda would drop off groceries and goodies and different things. And the Lasada tried to do as much as they could to facilitate activities for them in their rooms, games, and they'd have sing-alongs actually in their rooms, connecting, I think, through Wi-Fi or something, some way that they connected. And her spirits were fabulous. She was perky and happy and said she was doing fine. And luckily, she had another birthday since I photographed her last year. She's had both of her shots, and now they can do small groups. And her daughter has been able to visit her in person. So the whole project was just a wonderful way for me to see how people were coping with the stress, how people were doing what they could, either showing hope by planting plants, or some of the artists creating or doing home remodeling, whatever people were doing to try to keep busy. And I am really a little stunned that we're still under lockdown in some facilities, and we're still not able to gather in large groups, but people have been very creative on how to get around and still stay connected with everybody.
Thank you, Vicki.
Hey. Okay, so I kind of think in some ways this pandemic has been a really good opportunity for me to reflect on what kind of work I want to be doing and what kind of stories I want to be telling. There are a lot of considerations as an artist of what kind of subjects we choose, how we choose to portray those images and to share stories. And for me, this pandemic was not only kind of the collective shutdown of outside, but also a revisitation of some of the civil rights injustices that have happened in the nation here. So most of my work is history centered, and specifically this series of 3 pieces celebrating 3 African Americans in Milwaukee historically as heroes, especially during a time of unrest and a time of kind of isolation. It felt like a really good time to kind of produce these works. So this first piece is called Hammer and Hank. And this is the second piece I made as part of a larger series called the Negro Leagues. And as most folks know, Hank Aaron did play for the Milwaukee Braves when they were here, went down to Atlanta with them, and then came back and finished his career here as he is one of the 2 brothers holding the record for most professional career hits in Major League. So this first piece I started knowing I was going to make the second piece. And I started both of those pieces actually before Hank Aaron died. I had started thinking about the integration of the Negro League statistics into the Major League, and kind of how integration shaped the culture of baseball for Black folks specifically. So most folks know the MLB was segregated. What they might not realize is that the Women's League, which took place during the war, was also segregated. So men and women, Black folks were neither allowed to play professionally until later. And when I started thinking about the anniversaries of the Negro Leagues and everything that's been happening, it felt like it was really time to celebrate the accomplishments and the character of Hank Aaron, from his courageousness as a professional baseball player to his compassion as somebody who's really involved in charity work and making sure that there were avenues for access for folks who might not have that. So this piece came as kind of a very specific tribute to Hank Aaron, as not only a Milwaukeean, as a Wisconsin player, but just kind of as a baseball great. So we can go to the next slide if you'd like. This piece is a celebration of civil rights, very specifically in Milwaukee, around redline housing. And it is my interpretation of Vel Phillips, Father Grappy, the Milwaukee NAACP Commandos, celebrating the victory for fair housing laws passed in Milwaukee. This piece is one of the first ones where I actually started to incorporate my hand-carved linoleum. So the background has a series of 4 houses that are based on actual housing styles in the city. And there's a symbol in a square that signifies the neighborhood I live in. It's Harambe, which interestingly enough, actually, I'm right up the street from Fatima at 5 Points. And I was lucky enough to be able to see the show, and I recognized her right away, and I was really tickled. So I'll be having a show there pretty soon too. And then the last symbol on that background is the circle within the circle within the circle. And in traditional African fabric prints, that symbolizes the raindrop, and the raindrop hitting the surface of the water and the ripple of impact. And to me, Vel Phillips legislation and the 200 nights of marching along with the NAACP and the Commandos and Father Grappy's courage really made housing access something that was real for Black folks in Milwaukee. And I wanted to celebrate her in this way. And then this last piece is the final piece that I'll be talking about. I actually just finished this, and Mary was kind enough to let me bring it in this weekend. This is a fabric portrait of Hank Aaron and his brother Tommy. Most folks are pretty familiar with Hank as, you know, an MLB star, but they don't realize that he and his brother Tommy both played for the Milwaukee Braves. But Tommy passed away from leukemia at a pretty young age, and I didn't know that until I kind of started looking into Hank's personal history. And when I found out the 2 brothers were the leaders in home runs in MLB, and they still hold that record, I got really excited about it. And I wanted to return that story to a next generation, to bring not only history of segregation, of baseball, of American culture, but specifically of being at the forefront sometimes of adversity. So I wanted to make this image celebrating both Tommy and Hank as a team, and then changing the name to say brave. This piece is about these 2 brothers facing the odds, being courageous and opening doors. So those are my pieces, and I hope you love them.
Thanks, Rosie. Would you like to tell us also what the future of this image is for the summer?
Not yet, because we're not 100%, but there will be news relating to these pieces in the future.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. Sasha.
So this is a painting of my son Sven. I normally don't paint my son just because it's incredibly challenging. When you know someone and you see them day in and day out. I typically choose models that I connect with on an emotional level in some way or another. But there was something about this red hat, and next to that red barn, it seemed like such a typical Wisconsin scene to me that I wanted to capture and share. And the barn itself was bought by a couple who now serves as a rescue mission for abused animals and animals that are surrendered to them. And they have anything from tortoises, lizards, to potbelly pigs, donkeys, geese. I mean, all sorts of animals, not just farm animals. And I also wanted to give a little recognition to them because the work that they're doing is really spectacular. And this one is oil on cotton canvas. And I typically paint from photos, but lucky enough to have him around, my son around, I was able to use him on site. So this is a friend of a friend up on Cedar Pond, which is just north of Oostburg. And I dressed in garb that was mostly vintage pieces. She's wearing a child's Edwardian cape and an old fur, lots of different layers so that it reads in many different dimensions. And the feathers in her hair are all feathers that I've collected here near the studio. So I see woodpecker feathers, and I think there's a turkey feather in there, and a feather of a crow. Originally, I had used vintage feathers to put in her hair, but I later decided to do all of the indigenous birds in the area that come to visit me here at the studio. And the grayish sky and frozen pond, there's something I think very Wisconsin about that color palette. It feels like most of the year sometimes. So I felt that I wanted to include winter as a face of Wisconsin as well. And this one is my coworker's friend, Caitlin. She was a student at UWM, a photography student. And when I first met her, I just felt really connected to her. Spiritually, creatively, she understood what I was looking for when I asked her to pose for me. And I took her down we met at Clody Park in Whitefish Bay, and I had her pose along the lake, she's also the same model for Shore of Espit. So I did a series of photos and painted, oh my gosh, so many from that one photo session. And I dressed her in vintage fabric as well. A modern coat, and then a vintage feathered capelet that was a challenge to paint, but I just figured it was something that really resonated with me and with her. And I usually let my models pick out what they want to wear so that they feel comfortable and connected to the pieces as well. And as the sun was setting, the way that it was coming through the trees, that bright green, almost fluorescent yellow that was shining on her was just spectacular. And it was near the end of the shoot, so I could tell she was thinking about what else she had to do during the week, and her mind started to wander. Although her face was so serene, there was something interesting in the placement of her hands, especially the fisted one. And it was something that I really wanted to include, because typically I don't include the hands. But this time it felt like they also told part of the story. So, and oil on canvas. Oh, sorry, oil on board, yeah.
Oh.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Doughman. Before I get started talking about my work, I would like to thank the Cedarburg Art Museum and its staff for hosting this show, Faces of Wisconsin, and including me in this show with these many great artists. Many of you know me as a fixture in Cedarburg since I have lived here for over 60 years. I'm asked numerous times, since all I basically do is portraits, why do artists do portraits? Before the invention of photography, portraiture was done by painting, sculpting, or even drawing as the only way to record what somebody looked like. But for me, portraits should do more than just record. For me, they should show the inner soul of the sitter. My first painting I would like to talk about is Billy Mitchell. William Billy Mitchell was born in Milwaukee in 1879 and died in Milwaukee in 1936. He was a United States Army general. Back then, they did not have an Air Force yet. But he is regarded as the father of the U.S. Air Force. Mitchell served in France during World War I, commanding all American air combat units in that country. After the war, he was appointed Deputy Director of the Air Service and began advocating increased investment in air power, believing that this would prove vital in future wars. He argued particularly for the ability of bombers to sink battleships. He criticized many leaders of the Army with this argument and was thus demoted from Brigadier General to his permanent rank of Colonel due to his insubordination. He was later court-martialed for insubordination after accusing Army and Navy leaders for investing in battleships instead of aircraft carriers. He resigned from the service shortly after. Following his death by President Franklin Roosevelt, he was pardoned and his rank was returned as Major General. We know Milwaukee's Mitchell International Airport in Milwaukee because it's named after him. He is buried in Forest Home Cemetery in Milwaukee. The other picture I would like to talk about that I did was one of Father James Groppe. Father Groppe was born in Milwaukee in 1930, died in 1985. He was a former Roman Catholic priest who was first assigned to St. Veronica's Church in Milwaukee, but he asked later for a transfer to St. Boniface because it was prominently African-American congregation. Groppe then became active in the cause of civil rights for African Americans and marched along with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington and the Selma to Montgomery on behalf of the Voting Rights Act. He also participated in the voter registration project all over the South. Groppe returned to Milwaukee, becoming the advisor to the Milwaukee chapter of the NAACP Youth Council, organizing protests against segregation in the Milwaukee public schools. After leaving the priesthood, he became a city bus driver in Milwaukee and was still active to his death in the fighting for injustice and inequality for minorities in the inner city. I personally remember as a kid growing up in Cedarburg, I was a teenager when Father Groppe came and spoke, not at a Catholic church, he was not invited, but at a local Cedarburg Lutheran church. It sparked a lot of anger in Cedarburg. After this talk, they did a small march, the congregation and some other people from the area churches down Main Street in support of people in the inner city of Milwaukee. But due to that Lutheran pastor calling him into his congregation to speak, that pastor, after what happened, was later asked to leave his congregation. James Groppe is buried at Mount Olivet Catholic Cemetery in Milwaukee.
Patrick. I'm just going to fill in a little bit for Patrick because he spoke mostly about his subjects rather than his own technique. And in this show, we have this interesting 4-color linoleum block print, and it's quite large, 18 by 16 inches. And Patrick was first and foremost a printmaker, studying at UW-Madison with some of the eminent printmakers there from the 1970s and 80s. And then, next slide, please. He evolved the printmaking techniques of engraving into painting. And here, just like the Father James Grappi work or the Billy Mitchell painting that we recently saw, Doughman does an acrylic painting on board and then utilizes the printmaking technique of engraving to do the cross hatching and etch marks to get the texture and light and dark areas on his painting. So I just thought that would be interesting to point out.
Hi. I grew up in Greenbush, and it's a small community, and I think I choose my subjects, on a personal level. This particular model was someone's mother, and we hired her to model for a crowd of us to paint together from life. And as I worked on her, I noticed the similarities, and you might see similarities from her to me, but she reminded me of my grandfather. He had some very strong resemblance. So as I worked on her, it was a really wonderful experience because it was as if my grandfather's voice was in my head, and he had been passed away for many, many years. And so this particular model became very personal, and it was a real gift for me to have that experience of having someone from my past, a family member, as if they were alongside me as I worked. So that for this particular quiet strength, and she was, very quiet. I didn't know her personally. I knew her daughter, and she just represented something completely unexpected. And I think when you paint from life, a model, there's a conversation that is silent between the two of you. You, by the way they sit, the way they respond, you kind of have this connection that is unexpected, and at times it's just really wonderful treat. If they are a kind person, it may sound kind of strange, but if they're, their personality sort of comes out as they sit when you paint from life. So I worked on her for about 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, and came home, and then worked a little bit longer from the photograph and continued to have a wonderful visit with my grandfather. You want to put the next one on? Yeah. I mentioned before, as I grew up in a small village, and considering what I would paint for this show, this is sort of like past and present for me. The small village, there was so many farmers and small farms, but family farms that supported the whole family really well. They had a good life. And as things are changing, and I know of people that have had to sell their cows and they're losing their farms, or my sister and her husband, it's mostly her farm. She takes care of the animals. They, are, really connected to the land. He is a farmer I don't know how many generations back. And so I chose like the summer scene, I really wanted the land as part of the scene. You know, when I asked her to post me, I took some photos and I did some color studies from life. These kitties come and they follow her around, especially the little white kitty with a runt. She picked them up and like they take really good care of their animals and they're really well loved. And this little kitty, you know, I just captured this moment. She's talking to them and I just felt like this kind of encapsulates like the joys of farming and, you know, the sweet parts, you know, that you get to see this beautiful landscape and her connection with the animals. And this particular piece, I did some plein air painting on a real cold spring day. I said, hey, can you just stand there for a moment? Can I photograph you? And I just love the composition of this. It really captured kind of the struggles. I mean, it was very bitter, you know, damp, cold, and the look on her face was showing that coldness but not like angry. You know, still, this is part of what life is. You have to take care of the animals no matter what the weather is. And she's got her son's jacket, probably from the 80s. You know, the farm clothes. I asked her, does she still have this? And she said, oh no, they just disintegrate. They get worn out working on the farm with her hood. But I love the colors of that yellow, gold hood with all these cool blues around her. Of course, the animals are going to watch what's happening. But all these are oil on, this one's on canvas, something I had already had stretched. But they normally, the other ones are on linen, you know, stretch canvas and stretch linen. Yeah, but I just liked how, again, the land is such a big part of the farmers, you know, their history in this community. There's, you know, I grew up with farms everywhere. You know, I ride my bike and there was another farm and another one. And today that's changed. So I really wanted to bring her as a modern day farmer, kind of connecting with the land as their past, you know, family generational farms. Then there's not very many left. And hopefully we don't lose them all to the big factory farms. So I hope that it shows not only my love for my sister, but also her love for the land.
Thanks, Lori. I love how you have incorporated the landscape into your portraits. So this is a time when Annie will report to us any questions that people from the audience may have had.
Thanks to all of our public viewers today. I'm actually going to admit someone in right now. We didn't get a lot of questions, but we do have quite a few comments. One comment, beautiful. Thank you for your powerful work, Rosy. I completely agree. Another one, amazing work and fantastic storytelling with the work. I absolutely love this conversation. And then we did have a question from Kelly or Pam Rushman. Hi everyone, such an amazing body of work. What did you enjoy most about creating pieces for this exhibit? Any key learnings?
I can answer that. Painting my sister, I hadn't really painted any members, and it was as I'm finding her form, I was seeing my whole family in her face. So it was as if, oh, there's mom, and then as I'd work, and then I'd see my dad, and then I would see my grandmother or my mother's cheeks. So that was a real unexpected gift. Kind of like, it gets so personal when you're painting. So it feels like they're there with you. And my parents have since passed, so it was a real treasure to be able to have that experience with someone I know so well. And also then I appeared on the canvas a few times too.
Anyone else want to take that, or do you guys have questions for each other?
Sure. Actually, for me, it was kind of interesting to do this set of work because I originally had something different in mind. But with the pandemic, I had to change my plans. I wasn't really able to get out and get the photos I needed to make the work. And when I decided to do the second piece of Hank and Tommy Aaron, like I said, it was prior to Hank Aaron passing away. And I just wasn't necessarily equipped for the emotional response of his loss as I was kind of in the middle of these pieces. And it really slowed me down, which I was really surprised about because that hasn't necessarily happened to me before. That was a new experience. And the process of making the art was also partially kind of saying goodbye, but also knowing that by making this work, making it easier for other people to tell his story. That was something that was really cool for me.
I would say that for me, it was a wonderful opportunity to get to know some of my neighbors that I didn't know well before. And without the pandemic, I probably would not have had that opportunity. And it made me try to explore different ways of capturing people. And it was a challenge just to actually photograph people through glass and be able to get their faces and not totally have them fractured by reflections and that type of thing. So it provided a learning experience and technique for me, but it also actually was wonderful to communicate through the glass door and sometimes on my cell phone with them to tell them what I needed them to do. But I got to know people, my neighbors, a lot more than I would have probably if we were all outside going for walks and doing things around our yards. So I was thankful for that opportunity.
Thanks, Vicki. All right, any other questions? Okay. This was just to kind of update our viewers on Faces of Wisconsin. Again, it's on display through May 9th, 2021. We're currently open for viewing Friday and Saturday, noon to 4. Starting in March, we will also be open on Sundays from noon to 4. So definitely come on by and see all the pieces you saw today, plus so much more. Thank you so much to our artists. We appreciate you taking the time to do this for our viewers. Mary, do you have anything to add?
Well, it's been fun working with all of the artists and seeing such a variety of media. Just wanted to remind people that this show has been recorded and it will be on the museum's YouTube channel within a week, we're hopeful. And we're also thankful to Landmark Feed, Seed, and Supply for their support of our exhibition, expenses that are involved with that. And thanks for all of your participation. For the public viewers, you should know that you've really only seen about 80% of the artworks in the show, and the artists really do have some interesting comments on the labels, which make it worthwhile stopping into the museum to see the rest of the show, and personal comments by the artists on their bio sheets that are posted in the gallery. So with that, I'm happy that everyone was able to get together today. Thank you.
Yes, me too. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Great program.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys. Take care.
Thank you.